Right, well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is past 2 o'clock and start this meeting of the Planning Committee. Item 1 on the agenda, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest?
Chair.
Councillor Allen. Councillor Allen.
Yes, Chair, I'm waiting for the red box. There we go. Yeah, Chair, I'd like to declare an interest on application 07844/20, land at Manchester Road. The application is on behalf of Bolton at Home, and I am a member of the group board of Bolton at Home. So for that item, I will be withdrawing from the meeting and logging out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Your interest will be noted. And as you point out, you will leave the meeting for that item. Item 2 on the agenda, urgent business. Nothing has been brought to my attention. We have one, I think, from Councillor Newell.
Yes, sorry, Chair, we've got apologies from Councillor Wilkinson and Councillor Newall is deputising.
Thank you. For the benefit of the Visitors Committee, I will now make 1 or 2 introductions. I'm John Walsh and I'm Chairman of the Planning Committee for this municipal year. Councillor Ayub is the Vice Chair. We have in attendance Alex Allen, the Development Manager, Nicola Raby from the Legal Department, and Vicky Ridge from Democratic Services. We also have Martin Mansell and Jodie Turton, who are planning officers, and with us today, and they'll deal with specific applications or points raised. The Borough Solicitor, Helen Gorman, is also in attendance. Item 4 on the agenda, minutes of the previous meeting. These were circulated a few days ago. Are members happy to confirm there's a correct record? If you disagree,
I move them as a correct record.
Thank you. If anyone disagrees, could you please respond via the chat box? Those have been accepted. Thank you. We come therefore now to item 5, where we deal with reports from the Director of Place. For the benefit of visitors, can I just explain the process at this point? We'll be taking the reports not in the order in the bundle, but we will set out which reports have been taken at which point. We'll deal first with the application related to Crompton Place Shopping Centre, followed by the application at 58 Manchester Road, Thursday, and finally the application at Chorley Road, Horwich. The process for each application will introduce the application and details, and then invite ward councillors to speak for 5 minutes, and normally an objector for 3 minutes. Objector to take any questions. On this occasion, I allow the objector and applicant to speak for up to 5 minutes. Following the objector and any councillors, there will then be applicant to speak for again for 5 minutes and to take questions. Members will then be able to ask any questions of officers before the debate is opened. So the first application, which is on page 29 of the bundle, sorry, 27 of the bundle, is for a 2-part application. The full application for the demolition of Crompton Place Shopping Centre and associated structures at 56 Gate and 33 Victoria Square. And then Part B, an outline application with all matters reserved for the mixed development. Mr. Mansell, would you like to briefly introduce the report? And can I point out to councillors have got the benefit of a supplementary report picking up on points which have been raised in objection and subsequent to the application. Mr. Mansell, please.
Thank you, Chair. Consent is sought for the demolition of Crompton Place and some associated structures and buildings from the same period, together with outline consent for the principle of this mixed-use development and the parameters of its scale and siting. It's important to note that consent for the detailed design of the development is not being sought at this time and will be subject to reserved matters applications. Members will, of course, have seen a number of indicative images that set out the applicant's indicate direction of travel for the detailed design, but approval of these images is not being sought at present. The proposal has been amended during the application to remove the open freeze proposed for the top of the Victoria Square frontage, meaning that the frontage would change from one with the appearance of a building with 5 levels to one with the appearance of 4 levels. On the key issue of the impact on the significance of Bolton Town Hall and its setting, officers note that the height of the Victoria Square frontage would not rise above the main frontage of Bolton Town Hall. For this reason, amongst others, we don't feel that the development would cause harm to the significance of Bolton Town Hall or its setting. This view is entirely supported by the Council's Conservation Design Officer. Turning to the late list, you'll note that Historic England have withdrawn their concerns in full, stating that the revised proposals would allow Bolton Town Hall to retain its visual and physical preeminence. They've also confirmed to me that any concern over the potential of the development to form a distracting backdrop to the cenotaph can reasonably be resolved at the detailed stage. They do strongly encourage that the applicant engages with these views at that stage and provides further information to demonstrate its acceptability at that stage. Bolton District Civic Trust maintain their objections to the revised proposals, and these are represented on the late list and analysed as set out. I received an additional representation from the Vice Chair of the Trust last night, which is consistent with the objections already raised by the Trust. The draft conditions in the officer's report will need some further refinement and the agreement of the applicant if members are minded to approve the applications proposed. So in summary, this application would satisfy a number of objectives of the core strategy and the town centre framework, would deliver significant benefits in terms of new jobs, new dwellings, new businesses, and on the vitality and viability of Bolton Town Centre, together with the dramatic improvements in the 3 east-west and 1 north-south routes proposed through the site. We're satisfied that this can be achieved without harming the historic significance of Bolton Town Hall and the nearby heritage assets. We're therefore recommending that members express their consent for the proposal, but delegate the decision to officers for that further refinement of the conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mansell. Could I now invite representative of the Civic Trust, Mr. Richard Sherries, to address the meeting. You have got 5 minutes, as I said earlier, to speak, and I would ask you to take any questions from members.
Can I just confirm I can be heard clearly by everyone?
You can indeed. Thank you very much.
Right, I shall begin now. My name is Richard Sherris. I speak on behalf of the Bolton District Civic Trust as an independent voice for excellence in town planning. Our comments and objections submission runs to more than 15,000 words and 7 appendices. It draws on more than 150 years of diverse and relevant professional experience. Also, since March, we have researched 30 civic squares of excellence in Europe and UK. Merits. The overall concept of mixed development with opened up street plan is welcomed. Demerits. 1. Essentially, in our studied judgment, this is not sustainable development. It needs to be. Greater Manchester committed to net zero carbon commercial development by 2028. So excellence should be self-evident at outline stage. 2. Between public consultation and application, the scheme tripled its office floor area. It is now 30% of Bolton's express need up to 2037. Yet post-pandemic, market commentators now warn of a step change downwards in future office space need because of the realised potential of home working. 3, in its building envelope and massing, this is fundamentally an extravagant design. Large volume spaces, including storey heights around 12% greater than need. incurring excess energy in perpetuity, with no evident optimization of natural lighting and with a pathetic renewables ambition. Not excellence. In June, it was 38 degrees centigrade in the Arctic Circle. For the 21st century, new development needs to be climate ready. Bolton is already awash with buildings not even retrofit ready. The application has no aspiration, not even the officer's recommended conditions for attaining energy performance targets. Yet the current 5-year GM Environment Plan commits to the UK Green Building Council standards. Also, nothing in the conditions calling for a whole life carbon assessment or operational energy use and monitoring. Does the council's declared climate emergency actually mean anything? 4. Onto Victoria Square. This is a making a statement design where the town hall and cenotaph are rendered subservient instead of being the centerpiece. Above all, this is substantial harm to their setting, a clear contravention of national planning guidance. Despite changes to facades, these are still oversized and too near. Of our 30 civic squares researched on foreground distance, Bolton came bottom with the meanest distance. The scheme has not striven to integrate with the square, but to confront it. Why be constrained by an irrelevant 19th century building line if you own both sides? This cramping of the square is not just about impacting on our jewel in the crown heritage, it throws away an opportunity of civic betterment to give space for the cenotaph and enhance the square's setting. 5. In sort of Victoria Square, this core public space should be reconsidered now and concepts to be remodeled for 21st century needs with garden islands and greater space and to be climate adapted as part of an integrated design. And on Historic England's position, we simply remind the committee that HE's support for damaging the town hall facade in 2015 was outnumbered 8-1 by other heritage bodies across England, which included the Civic Trust. Civic Trust asks why not press pause briefly, consult on concepts for the square, and also knock the scheme into a better sustainable shape. The decision you have is not between this and no scheme. The choice can be between this and a much better scheme. All our objections stem from a flawed design brief. In sum, what we have here is inefficient extravagance and a making a statement on Victoria Square, an unsustainable design which includes substantial harm to heritage, civic betterment constrained by a pointless embodiment of a 19th century building line, and an approach based on let's cross our fingers and hope for excellence in reserve matters. I conclude this outline application needs far more work on its outline concepts and evidence of commitment towards being a climate-ready development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We take questions now from members. Councillor Hornby.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to the objector for such a passionate insight into your views on this town centre development. I'm curious, in the early part of what you said, that this particular development was non-sustainable compared with other towns in the northwest. Can you just elaborate a little bit more on that, please?
I didn't compare it to other towns in the northwest, but I did say I consider it to be unsustainable development because we've looked at it in great detail, and I could not really articulate in 5 minutes those details. I did allude to the extravagant volumes they have, for example, in the Bolton Works, where you've got those series of 6 sheds. There's a huge volume in there, made of about 12,000 cubic meters, which is open volume. You've got to think in terms of how this space is going to be heated during winter times, how it's going to be ventilated. The floor story heights are rather excessive, as I've suggested. This comes from our studied experience. And overall, it means that for example, the renewables, we've got a paltry 500 square meters suggested in the energy and sustainability statement, and we've got here something like about a 17,000 square meter site. So to me, that is grossly inadequate. And we have got all we've got in terms of attention for integrated green infrastructure is an idea that means trees in pots. It does not. It means integration, where you integrate with, for example, vertical walls, where you actually help the fabric of the building to be more sustainable. Okay. Does that help?
Thank you.
Sure.
Any further questions to Mr. Sherries? Thank you very much indeed for that presentation. If I could now invite Stephen Turner to speak in support of the application. Mr. Turner, as you heard, you have now got 5 minutes, and then I will invite members to pose any questions they may have from your presentation.
Thank you, Chair. We ask the members to support the application for the redevelopment of Crompton Place Shopping Centre. Its approval will enable Bolton Regeneration to proceed with activities aimed at commencing construction in 2021. The application we make today follows an 18-month period of extensive market demand analysis, design planning, and a consultation process that have all shaped the scheme's proposed mixed density design and use. Bolton Regeneration have been open-minded in its approach throughout and has made fundamental changes to respond positively to comments made by all consultees. We believe the scheme is much improved as a result, and the proposal before you now has the full support of Places Matter, Historic England, and Bolton's design and conservation officers. Added to this, by far the most consistent theme raised by residents and stakeholders during the public consultation process was the desire, above all else, to see the scheme actually delivered. As with many town centres across the country, Crompton Place and areas of the town centre have suffered and are no longer fit for purpose owing to the decline of the high street shopping that has been decades in the making. The key to a successful regeneration of Bolton Town Centre is to create an attractive place that is both prosperous and welcoming to visitors, businesses and residents alike. It's about creating a sustainable development where people will want to live, work and play, putting communities back at their heart and providing a much needed boost to the economy. Our vision is of a vibrant, living, working and creative community at the heart of Bolton that will significantly improve the town's centre offer, broaden its appeal, complement existing attractions and enhance the surrounding historic fabric. State-of-the-art facilities are delivered that will have built-in flexibility, and buildings will be surrounded by high-quality public realm and generous open spaces. The new routes to be provided across the site will significantly improve the connectivity and will also provide dramatic new vistas of the Town Hall, no doubt one of the UK's most impressive buildings. Substantial medium to long-term economic benefits will be felt as early as 2021. The construction phase alone will deliver over 70 million into the local economy, creating 240 full-time equivalent jobs for the community. When completed, the scheme will generate over 1,300 jobs, 80 into the economy, and over 1 million a year in business rates for the council. As the lasting effects of the pandemic, we could witness a cultural shift towards living, working, and socialising closer to our communities. This change of attitude, combined with the rise of flexible working, declining commutes, and possible moves by occupiers wishing to reduce costs and transfer from larger cities to smaller regional towns, could result in a massive upside for Bolton to absorb this demand. Flexibility and sustainability are at the very heart of this scheme. Mixed-use development supports the most sustainable models of living and working, reducing the need for travel while creating self-sustaining ecosystems where residents have access to daily necessities as well as a variety of activities offered, which in turn will help fuel the day and nighttime economies. The scheme will consist of a wide variety of uses to complement one another. By design, each use will comprise of built-in flexibility and generous spatial allowances in order to accommodate changes in market demands over the next 50 years. Spaces can be therefore easily adapted for alternative uses without resorting to major interventions like demolition. In the detailed design stage, we will explore more deeply how we will address sustainability and environmental design agendas in respect to renewable energy and the greening of the town. Significant resources have been set aside for this purpose. Upon approval, we intend to launch the marketing and promotion of the site and complete the detailed design stages. This in turn enables us to finalise agreements with organisations, tenants and operators, appoint the general contractor, address all reserve matters and achieve financial close in 2021. The project's achieving a shovel-ready status in 2021 is critical in positioning Bolton's landmark development to capture the most from the UK government's £5 billion Build Back Better strategy. The most local authorities are insufficiently prepared for town centre regeneration tasks at hand, or indeed far behind the placemaking purposes to conceive, let alone build anytime soon. This is certainly not the case for Bolton. It's been 3 years since Bolton launched its transformative vision, and in that time, as testament to its strength and commitment, Bolton is now primed to rise to the challenge of shaping a successful town centre for its future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have got 4 members with questions at the moment. Councillor Hornby.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, my question is in relation to if this application was approved for the demolition this afternoon. I'm curious as to 1 or 2 things. One, what's the time scale involved with regard to this? When would it be commencing? And what has been put in place with regard to minimising the disruption around the town and the traffic situation? In other words, minimising the situation with that. If you could answer that, please.
In terms of timing for demolition, we have 2 options. We're obviously aware of this peregrine falcon nesting issue. So we can either commence demolition before that nesting season starts, which means we'd be looking to do so as early as January. If we do not manage to commence the demolition works before March, then that means we will not be starting until the very end of that nesting season, which is means July or August of 2021. In terms of disruption, the Bolton Regeneration is partnered with a company called Beijing Construction International, who are a major tier 1 general contractor. So we've been working extensively with them and the council officers to put in place a logistics plan to minimise the disruption during the construction, so that materials can be brought to and from the site in the most careful way we can.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hayes.
Yes, thank you very much indeed. You've probably answered part of my question, the latter part of your remarks, but you mentioned extensive research and consultation have taken place. Of course, in the middle of that, we've had one of the biggest upsets to the British economy probably any of us can remember. Are you confident that your concept can adapt to the as yet unknown changes for the economy in the future? I'll just need comments on that, please.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've been undertaking forensic and detailed analysis of what we expect to be the outcomes from the pandemic. I think a lot of the points that was made by the objector was relating to the generosity in the sizing of the buildings, and that really comes back to the heart of why we've gone with that design approach, because it actually means that the buildings have an inherent flexibility design within them, so that should demands and habits change, that the buildings can be repurposed and reused for a variety of different uses, not just the ones that are proposed today. So, for example, Crompton Place in its current form has very little reusability because its floor-to-ceiling heights are not now regarded as appropriate for the vast majority of uses. So we've tried to adapt a new design which allows each of the blocks that you see as part of the submission could actually be reused for different uses as and when demands happen. But in terms of the 2 largest uses, residential and office are the 2 predominant largest uses of the mixes. We are only at stage 2 design here, so we have completely ahead of us we are actually at the ideal time for us to go back and, well, not go back, go forward in the stage 3 and 4 design process, engage with our development property advisors who have already canvassed hundreds and hundreds of corporate organisations who've in turn canvassed their staff, so that they can get a picture as to what does the future look like. But you know, we've provided your officers with a lot of reports which summarise in effect that the office is certainly not dead, far from it, and living in these central locations is the same. So we have the opportunity now, because of the spatial allowances that we've already allocated, to ensure that the schemes that we do come forward with are totally state of the art. And when we mean state of the art, we mean market facing, and that market now, the reality of the market facing us is a post-pandemic world. So our designs will totally have that design feature designed into its DNA for accommodating scenarios where pandemic outbreaks may happen or public health emergencies may happen again.
Thank you. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Chair. I've read through all of the documentation around this application, and there's a lot of it. There are hundreds and hundreds of pages on the website. And a bit like your presentation, sir, there's a lot of talk about what the new development will be and how good it will be. But I see very little mention of the application that you're asking for full approval for, and that's the demolition. So I'm interested in why your application fails to include a detailed demolition plan, particularly phasing and protection of the public and protection of monuments and all this kind of thing. So I'm interested in why there seems to be this shortage of detail on the demolition. Thank you.
Well, as I said, we have conducted quite detailed analysis of the demolition package of works. We've gone out to the market, and we've even spoken to a local specialist demolition contractor. And as I said, we've been engaging with the offices within the City Council in order to agree that detail. I do think we have an opportunity to provide as much detail and method statements in the weeks and months ahead of us before these works will start. So we can look to come back to you with that information.
Councillor Allen, I think you want a supplementary.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, please. Thanks for that. I don't doubt the sincerity of what you're trying to do, but it does seem rather strange that you're asking us for full approval for the demolition without us even knowing what the routes will be for construction vehicles or demolition vehicles, without even knowing how you're going to protect the public and our monuments. So I do find it a bit strange that you have focused on the new development and not on the demolition. So I'm interested in what other information will you be providing to us in terms of the demolition? Thank you.
Okay, well, we have as I understand it, tracking back from my memories, that a full demolition statement was provided. A demolition management plan was submitted as part of the documentation. And I do believe, you'll forgive me, I wasn't in all of the meetings, but there were absolutely routes planned for the movement of materials, the bringing in of major plant, etc. So I'm sure we can dig out the report, routes, methods, etc., logistics, noise, dust management. I'm pretty sure all of that was included. I mean, Martin can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that was included in the report.
Thank you. Councillor Howard?
Thank you, Chair. I want to ask Mr. Turner about Building C. I just want to understand better what's described clearly as Bolton Works. I just want to understand whether we'll end up, in a sense, referring to the building, the whole building as Bolton Works, or whether it's more about a component, like a company for leaseholders, that presently is being part of Building C and therefore called Bolton Works. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, Bolton Works is a working title at the moment for that component of the development. We've done an enormous amount of research and analysis for that particular component, which we see as one of the future very, very compelling, unique selling points for this scheme. In effect, we see the ground floor areas as a food and beverage, retail and leisure offering, which will be for local and startup businesses to take space, flexible space, and there are large sort of communal gathering and seating areas for the public to come and sit, eat, drink, socialise, and there will be some of the space will be allocated for spontaneous retail acquisitions. On the mezzanine level of that space, we see it as an incubator and space for businesses to base themselves. And so we see it as an open, light facility really for the town centre. It's almost part of the public realm. It's really open for the public to use, and particularly when Bolton is hosting its impressive events that it has on its calendar, Ironman Food Festival, etc., and perhaps more, that this facility will really be at the heart of what Bolton puts on for the rest of the country and the region when they come and visit. Sometimes when we've been to the food festival ourselves, sometimes the weather can really make a lot of the local businesses suffer. So we think this facility has a great potential for that event, but then also you think about Easter and Christmas markets and things like that. So that's the concept behind the space, and there's quite a lot of other successful examples of that type of offering that's working very, very well at the moment. And at the heart, again, it has complete adaptability and flexibility designed into it. So that's the concept.
Thank you. Councillor Sherrington.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to ask, when the demolition is done and we're actually waiting then for the new buildings to go up, I was just wondering, are you going to clad the outside of the actual site? And I was just wondering whether you were going to do it to use probably some graphics, a little bit like we did with the interchange, which is very good because they did it with graphics. They didn't get anybody spraying graffiti or anything like that on it because there was already graphics there. And also to actually have some little portholes so people can actually see through what's going on the actual construction, because it's all to do with taking ownership. And if people feel that they already know the buildings before they're there, it actually helps for the use of the buildings afterwards. So I was just wondering if you could take that on board. Thank you.
Yeah, We will be delighted to include things like that, which we think is definitely positive. As you say, I think as soon as work start, it's an opportunity for us to start promoting and advertising the site. So yeah, we will be very keen to as early as possible in the process make sure that everything is in good working order, both from a health and safety perspective as well as from a promotion, and letting the local residents and stakeholders feel that they can start taking ownership of this project.
Thank you. Councillor Darvesh.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I was just wondering, in terms of you've included a number of design features in the application. Now, in terms of the reserved matters at that stage, what further consultation will be taking place to determine the final design aspects?
We will be expecting that the actual detail of the facades, the material selection, the colours, all of that level of detail, we will be coming back to the council's officers with that level of detail. And if that process needs to involve further consultation with your good selves, then we wouldn't be opposed to that.
Thank you, Mr. Turner.
Chair.
Councillor Vest, do you want to come back?
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I just want to come back. I mean, in most of these applications, they have a number of conditions which obviously relate to the actual type of brick, the colours, everything else. So I was just wondering actually about the design, the stone column design, the glass, everything else.
Yeah.
Before you put the reserve stage application in terms of the actual final pictures, what they're going to look like, does that go through a consultation process again? That's what I'm thinking.
I'm not sure, to be brutally honest, to answer that question. We will be led by the planning officers in the council in that regard. So could I defer to come back to you on that?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. That concludes all the questions, Mr. Turner. Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to just invite no questions to officers, and before we do so, I think, Mr. Mansell, you want to clarify points on the demolition process, and you could perhaps then cover that final point that's just been raised.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I've just looked at the application file, and there is a demolition management plan on there. It runs to some 45 pages, showing the logistics of how that will be carried out. It has been looked at by our highway engineers. They are satisfied with the rationale there. It probably needs some more detail in terms of things like traffic regulation orders, but the general approach is one that our highway engineers are satisfied with, and it does form part of the application submissions. In terms of I suppose how we'd look at the next stages, I would imagine that as soon as the further detailed designs are being progressed, then meetings will take place between officers, the applicant, their architects, and the team. Whether that then results in further public consultation, I suppose I'd take the view I would encourage it, but ultimately it's a matter for the applicant whether they choose to do a similar form of public consultation as they did on the initial proposals. Covers those points.
Thank you. Two members indicating the questions to officers. Councillor Peel.
Thank you, Chair. The answer that Mr. Mansell just gave was my question, but I quickly thought of a different one as he was speaking, and that is in terms of the existing business at the Crompton place. And it may be that planning officers can't answer this. It may be more to do with our economic development section, but clearly members will need reassurance that there's the decanting process for those existing businesses, especially those with large floor space, has all been considered in a lot of detail. And once, as we move towards demolition, those businesses will be able to be decanted and looked after in places in Bolton that aren't too far from where they are at the moment.
Thank you, Phil. Mr. Mansell, can you respond to that?
Yeah, it will only be brief, but I'm just going to say that, yeah, Councillor Peel is right to say that that would be primarily the responsibility of the economic development officers. But I'm hoping the Assistant Director, Paul Whittingham, just going to invite him if he wants to add to that further, if that's okay with you, Chair.
Yeah, fine, thank you. Mr. Whittingham.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, there is an established negotiation and consultation route with all of the current occupiers of the buildings. We've got that's been going on for some time already. There's active meetings. I think there's one yesterday to keep people up to date, to ensure that we can, where possible, meet their needs in terms of finding alternative locations within the town centre. To some degree, members may be aware that that is the reason why the council has purchased Victoria Chambers, I think it's called, where Foster Coffee used to be. So yeah, I mean we've got space there, and the aim is to as much as possible move existing occupiers of Crompton Place into new locations around the town centre. There may be some that choose that they want to move elsewhere within the borough. And we've got to yet have those final negotiations with all of the actual occupiers, but there's an ongoing engagement there that we can I can certainly commit to on behalf of committee that will be done. Thank you, Chair.
Can I just clarify, Mr. Whittingham, does that include businesses on the periphery of the site who might be adversely affected by demolition and construction? I mean, just to move on from what Martin has said, we've been engaging with the developers for a long time on the the construction and logistics. There's a policy within Greater Manchester that's called CLOGS, which is construction, logistics and community safety. So there's a policy there for how good construction should take place, and part of that will mean actively engaging with not just the occupiers of the actual site, but the occupiers of the surrounding buildings, to make sure that they can be supported through the construction process. One of those challenges is to members will be familiar with the fact that the council's got a town centre design master plan. We've got the Vision 2030 and beyond, which emphasises rebuilding that link that has been cut off for so long. So even during the construction, then the challenge that I've posed to Stephen and his team is to find a way to reopen that link to Bradshawgate during construction to support those surrounding businesses, and then on the other side of the development to ensure that existing businesses that are operating aren't impacted
by the period of construction and demolition. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions, but first of all, my apologies perhaps to the supporter and to Mr. Mansell, because on the website there is in fact a demolition plan. I don't know how I missed it, but there is a demolition plan with quite a lot of detail in, some of which I've just looked at and obviously needs more consideration. There does seem still to be some omissions in it, particularly around the vehicle access, which proposes closing Mealhouse Lane but leaving Hotel Street and Market Street open to pedestrians and to demolition traffic. So I think there's still some information needed there. I'm glad that the question's been asked already about what happens to the existing stores, because that's a big issue. I'm partly reassured by Mr. Whittingham's comments, but I am still concerned by some of the big tenants, and I'd like to know exactly where people like Boots and Primark are going to decant to, because they are major sort of anchor tenants of Crompton Place. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Whittingham, do you want to take that one?
Thank you, Chair. I think the difficulty is that there's ongoing discussions with both Boots and Primark. I wouldn't like to be announcing those commercial negotiations as part of a planning committee process. I mean, I can certainly advise members that we're actively looking at ways to find solutions to those businesses staying and operating within the town centre, ways to expand other businesses within or other locations within the town centre. So if Boots were to reduce the size of their operation here, or within where they are within Crompton Place, or even cease to operate in that location, then it's how we can ensure that they can expand elsewhere within the town centre. But as members will appreciate, those are detailed discussions and commercial discussions that need to take place with those appropriate occupiers. But the council is committed to doing everything it can to seek to retain existing businesses that are present within Crompton Place somewhere else within the town.
Thank you for that. That deals with all the questions. We come then to the debate. Councillor Peel.
Thank you, Chair. I think there was a lot of detailed questions there, and very useful that those questions were asked and the answers were given to them, because this is a massive, major application for Bolton, and there are quite a lot of facets to it, albeit we need to remember that just the demolition is the detailed one, and the redevelopment is the outline, with the details of that outline to come in future application or applications. So I just want to start on the principle. So the principle, I don't think there's anybody at all who would object to it. This is a massively important piece of regeneration for our town centre, and I think it demonstrates quite importantly that the council, when it set out its strategy a few years ago and put money on the table to bring in private investors, the council didn't want to just recreate a town centre, a retail-led town centre, which quite frankly it is not the future of town centres anymore. Everybody knows that. Shopping habits have changed. The way people want to purchase things have changed, and town centres can no longer be retail-led and retail-dominated in the way they used to be. And I think our strategy in Bolton has got that point spot on. So this is a mixed-use development. It is some retail, obviously. Retail still very much at the core. It is offices. It is residential, and it is cultural, with cultural space as well. And the reason people might ask is, why does I mean, some people do ask this question: why does the council engage itself so much in these types of big regeneration projects? Well, the answer is quite simple. It's the economy and it's jobs. These types of major regeneration schemes bring lots and lots of new jobs to local people. It generates the economy. It generates more being spent in the town centre. Of course, the residential aspect is a big part of our housing strategy, which is, if all goes according to plan, will protect our green belt. We can only protect our green belt by having new housing in brownfield sites and in sustainable locations like Bolton Town Centre, which has been earmarked for thousands of new residential units. And this is a really important part of that. It does generate, along with Central Street, Church Wharf, Trinity Quarter, all the other areas, it will generate a new urban village community in Bolton Town Centre that then go on to create their own demands for local services and local shops within that town centre. So the entire concept is brilliant, and no matter what external forces throw at us, be it recessions or be it COVID lockdown, this will progress. I'm pretty sure it will progress. I want to just mention the offices issue, because I think it might be a mistake. I think a number of us have assumed that the demand for offices is going to drop substantially because there will be an uplift in home working, but that's not necessarily the case. I think what will undoubtedly happen is the demand for different types of offices is going to change. People businesses who for their own business needs need to continue operating from office space want modern, redesigned, spacious office spaces. Old offices that were built for another time that can be quite compact and claustrophobic are no longer going to be in demand. And so Bolton's in a prime position now where it's setting out and is actually designing a new office space to actually grasp this development for the future, because there will be new spacious office spaces will be in big demand. The second major aspect of this is obviously all of the design issues and the issues that have been raised by Bolton Civic Trust. I've got mixed feelings about this, and I think the important thing we've got to remember is this is an outline application, and I think the report makes it quite clear that those details of design will come in the reserved matters application, because I've got quite strong views about this. Some aspects of the entire structures are quite good. Some of the things we've seen are quite good. I'm not overly excited about the facade facing the town hall. I think we can do much better. Well before my time, even perhaps before your time, Chairman, when our councillor forefathers gave permission for what I can only describe as a hideous building along Victoria Square that faces the town hall, I think they did a disservice to the next generations. I know that building replaced even worse buildings that were there before it, but it didn't do any justice at all to our wonderful town hall and Victoria Square, and it's just a horrible, stark 70s building. We are in a wonderful opportunity here to not repeat a mistake like that and land the next generation for the next 40 or 50 years with something that is going to look out of place. So it is incredibly important that that facade that faces Victoria Square is done properly. I'm mindful of the last major building that was built at Victoria Square, just off Wellsprings. That was done in a very sympathetic style, very much matching Paderborn House, which of course in its own matches the town hall, like the old Mothercare building, which is now Barclays. All of these buildings were constructed in a very sympathetic manner to fit in well with the Victorian town hall. So all of those details on the facade, the colours and the material are going to be really important for members and for the people of Bolton. But I'm very, very confident that this is council led, and it has to be council led. The council has to make it quite clear to the developers exactly what we are looking for at this location. A lot more detail to come out there, and I think members need to be involved with that in some way to make sure that this point comes across very strongly. We have this golden opportunity, and we should not squander it. Just one final. And the other part of the reserve matter application, of course, are the issues of sustainability, energy efficiency, etc. We agree with the objective. We want to see bold statements made here. We want to see this opportunity grasped to make a sustainable collection of buildings for the future. I am very much looking forward to seeing, because I do believe this will go through. I'm very much looking forward to seeing the route between the town hall and Bradshawgate. Let's get rid of the myth that there was a route there before. Well, there wasn't. There never has been a route there before. Before the Crompton, well, the route you had with the Crompton place was indoors, and before then it was a rabbit warren of streets. So this will be the first time ever that Victoria Square and the town hall is open from Bradshawgate. I think that would be absolutely stunning. I think it will be the jewel in the crown of this development, and of course it will benefit businesses at Bradshawgate and Churchgate. So with all of those caveats about the design and about us getting it right for the future, I've got no hesitation in moving the application for the demolition and the outline permission for the buildings. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Peel. Councillor Hornby.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very pleased to second this application to go before the directors be delegated. It is an important piece, and I said it before about certain things. It's a piece of the jigsaw, but a very important piece of the jigsaw. We've spent the last 2 to 3 years where we've been talking the talk to make sure this is got right. Now we're going to walk the walk and start the development. But none of this would have ever happened, and Councillor Peel mentioned it briefly in his excellent starting of this application when he talked about the investment that this council made over 2 years ago of £100 million. And that in itself said to developers that we as an authority, and it had all party support, as we all know, have confidence in our town centre to get this right. I think it's very, very, very important. I'm not going to go out into great detail because Councillor Peel has gone on about that. I do think that it is an important piece. I think, though, if you recall back to 2006, 2007, when an application was made for Crompton Place by the then Primark to close off the entrance from Bradshawgate through, I do believe that was a very bad mistake because the foot fodder was not going through. However, I think the proposal that we've got before us, and with the vision to be able to see from the town hall steps all the way through to Bradshawgate, and people be able to walk backwards and forwards, and all that, along with a potential nighttime economy along as well with housing and things like that, it has got to be a fantastic benefit to this town. So I'm more than happy to second this application to go before the Director for Delegation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Hornby. Councillor Howarth.
Thank you, Chair. I want to just touch first on the consultation that informed these outline plans. I remember looking at that document with all the documents on this. Councillor Allen's right, there's a lot to read. And it stood out on those post-it notes from some of those that made comments. They said in the consultation, please don't let Bolton Town Centre die. There were some strong feelings that the public had about Bolton Town Centre. This plan seeks to greatly boost the critical mass of people in Bolton Town Centre around the clock from the things that they're putting forward. And it also seeks, of course, to boost the hustle and bustle of the whole area. The 2020 position on Grade A office accommodation, Bolton Town Centre, it does tell us simply, even within the COVID-19 changes, that assessment tells us simply, we don't have enough Grade A office accommodation. More is needed soon. It's needed soon for the survivability of Bolton Town Centre economy, and it's a superb place to put that office accommodation in Victoria Square. The Bolton Town Centre Framework 2017, of course, is a material matter today as we look at this outline, and it's no surprise to find that the policy references the Bolton economic strategy. And sure, we are challenged by COVID-19. The last assessment tells us we can grow tourism here by 17.2 million. So a hotel, a retail offer, a hospitality offer, it all matters. Tourism matters, and it was valued at 420 million for Bolton in 2017. Other figures attached, of course, are we've got around 34,000 workers who commute to Bolton. Now that's as a place. But that, of course, involves people working in or using Bolton Town Centre, and they are potential customers too if they're not yet coming into Bolton Town Centre. The vibrancy of Bolton Town Centre needs to increase. That also came through that public consultation. We particularly need more vibrancy to Hotel Street and Victoria Square area. That is this central area of the town centre. We've also got around 11,000 students a year study at the University of Bolton. Again, more customers for the town centre. More customers so that this area of the town centre can thrive more and be more reinvigorated. This outline plan, if it goes ahead, it will allow Bolton Town Centre to take advantage of what I call the shift that's going on in Greater Manchester. We've got big institutions like the BBC and GCHQ in the two cities. That puts rents and prices in a rise position, and for me that's a demand shift. We need for our people here to be able to offer affordable accommodation, which is a big part of this application, and we must reap the benefits also of the change that is going on where things are becoming less affordable outside of Bolton. People do want to rent and commute, that's fine. And businesses with this good offer will want to be here. I did ask, of course, about what's called Bolton Works, Building C, because I was reminded when I read all this application of Print Works in Manchester. I wondered about the attachment to that. I must admit, I'm not actually persuaded. I'm persuaded on the content after Mr. Turner gave all that detail, which is helpful even for an outline application, but I'm not persuaded by the title Bolton Works. So that may be a done deal, but it's on Exchange Street. I mean, I just like, perhaps different title. I like the idea of the Exchange, but that will be something for reserved matters. I do want to give a couple of comments on reserved matters as heads up, please. One is lighting. I would ask that the ongoing plans do come up with the best lighting schemes possible for Block D and Block C, and that's where they front Victoria Square, certainly for winter and the dark days. And I was thinking about the nighttime economy. Mr. Turner, thankful, he did mention the nighttime economy, good stuff. when we want to keep people enjoying life in Bolton Town Centre. So that's lighting, Chair. The other heads up, I think this is the last thing I want to say, is a heads up on reserved matters of access. I actually want us to get the best we can for disabled people, disabled workers, those that use disabled vehicles, including taxis, also toilets, and plus the needs of parents with babies and toddlers, using these brand new buildings. And I say that, sorry to end slightly on a negative note, I'm not persuaded that the last time we had, it might not be the last one, but when we had a capital project of 43 million, the TFGM interchange, I don't feel we managed to get the best we could on all of the things that I've just described there, disabled people, toilets, that sort of thing. I want to learn from that capital project to do even better on this capital project as it progresses, and I accept that will be a reserved matter on access. So thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Allen.
Okay, thank you, Chair. A lot's been said already, so I'll try not to repeat too much of what's been said. Councillor Peel in particular, I thought, made a really good presentation of what are the salient points. We have to remember, I know it's been said once, but it's worth repeating, we have to remember that we're being asked for full planning permission for the demolition and outline planning permission for the major part of the construction. And outline planning permission, of course, is mainly concerned with the principle of this kind of development, and I don't think anyone would argue against that, and also the means of access. And I just want to comment on the means of access, because the means of access when this project is finished for servicing is a sort of relatively small service yard that, according to the reports, can accommodate just 4 heavy goods vehicles. So I'm just a bit concerned that we might have heavy goods vehicles queuing up to get access to the service yard, and if they do, they'll be queuing up on Bradshawgate probably. So that's just a little concern that perhaps directors could look at. But yes, we need this kind of development. It's potentially a wonderful development. There are some issues with it. Remember, it has been fairly significantly revised, and we have Heritage England, Historic England, and more importantly, we have Bolton and District Civic Trust to thank for a lot of these alterations. So we should be grateful to them. Some of the good alterations to it involve stepping back the 5th and 6th floors, so the massing doesn't look quite so much. An important change was made to this colonnade, the vertical columns on the facade facing the town hall. I think on the original scheme they were just single story, which gave the effect of a sort of tunnel and a dark entry. Those are now 4 stories high, so I think they have much greater presence and more attractive architecture. I also like the concept that the finishes, and this addresses one of Councillor Peel's concerns, the finishes on the Bradshawgate facade could very well be brick, which fits in with the street scene there, and the finishes on the Victoria Square facade could very well be the sort of reconstituted stone tiles that we see on the Wellsprings and other buildings. So that will improve the appearance. I'm also pleased that the 200 or so apartments are to be of mixed value and mixed accommodation, and members will know that I've mentioned this many times in planning. It's important that we have a range of accommodation from, you know, fairly small 1-bedroomed apartments up to 2 and 3 and perhaps even 4-bedroom, and that's what's proposed here, so I'm pleased about that. So that really covers the outline planning permission. There is lots of opportunity yet to discuss some of the detail. I'm glad that stores are being consulted with regards to relocation. So turning now to the demolition, there is a demolition plan, and I don't know how I missed that, but I did. I've now been reading it for the past 10 minutes. It includes quite a lot of detail, but still perhaps is short on some detail around vehicle movements. We don't know how many vehicle movements there will be. The routes are identified. Mealhouse Lane is it would seem to be closed to the public. There are of course shops on Mealhouse Lane, but other streets like Hotel Street and Market Street will remain open to the public. So there'll be some barriers, there'll be some segregation obviously between pedestrians and vehicles. I'll be interested in knowing a bit more detail about what that could be. Overriding issue really is, and I'm sure this could be a condition, perhaps Martin Mansell might want to comment on this, but we really need a condition, I feel, that says demolition will not begin until the final full approval of planning permission for the whole site. And I say that because everybody wants to demolish and get on with the job, and that's great, but things do have a habit of going wrong sometimes, and what we do not want is for this to be demolished and then left as a derelict site for years. We have several of those around the town centre, and we certainly don't want one in this location. So demolition should not begin until planning approval has been granted. That doesn't guarantee that we won't be left with an empty site, but at least it minimises the risk. So with all of that, Chair, I'm happy to support this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sherrington.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just switching myself on. What I've got concerns about is whether the climate change issues will be actually driven to the highest that they possibly can be. In other words, sometimes we have these things that come through and planning, and it tends to be whatever's acceptable at that particular time that has come through on the planner's guidebook, if you like. And I do feel that because the fact that, well, I'm the person from the Labour group actually who's on the climate change situation, and I do feel that sometimes doing that is fatal really, because quite simply, you know, another 10 years things can be completely different as far as the climate change is concerned, and also what's acceptable will be different as well. And if we're talking about a building here that we want to be there for a very long time, and I know that it's only outlined this, but I do feel that we need to be saying to the people who are going to produce this building what the acceptabilities are from Bolton. And I do think that we need to be thinking, doing things very, very forward thinking, rather than just what's in the book, if you understand me. And so I don't know how we can actually push this, but I'm mentioning it now because obviously, you know, when the planning does come in, I would like some of that to have been thought through very, very clearly, so that we can get a building that represents not just now, not just next year, but represents something that probably could be around in, you know, 2060, 2070, something that we can be very, very proud of for a very long time. So I just hope that that's what is going to happen regarding this. And the other thing is as well, I don't know if anybody, well, not you gentlemen probably won't know about this, but the baby changing room in Crompton Place is probably one of the things that is really good that happens at Crompton Place. Is probably the best one we've got in Bolton. And so I'm hoping that they will take that on board as well, about how they're going to actually continue to get this accolade, because I do think that it's a necessity within our town. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Darvish.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think anybody can actually doubt that the public benefit from this application is overwhelming and is always going to be greater than any sort of heritage harm that the application produces. But I just want to focus on the question I asked earlier, which is all about the reserved matters consultation and design, because design is incredibly subjective. And the truth is, and Councillor Peel alluded on it, that the facade could be a lot better in terms of facing Victoria Square. At this moment in time, the pictures, the design looks very similar to the next building at Middlebrook with the stone columns and the glass behind it. So I think a lot more could actually be done there. I am intrigued by the other side of the town hall, which is the Le Mans Crescent and the arches. Now, I know it's a heads up from me anyway, but if, for example, these columns, these stone columns could be almost put in some sort of formation, block formation, resembles a curve almost like an arch, with the streets in the middle, which do add a lot of value to the application. I think something else could be produced here, which will be a lot more better in terms of the design. But obviously we've got a reserved matters application coming to us, but I think there has to be some sort of consultation before the reserved matters application, otherwise we'll keep going back and forwards in terms of the design. Thank you.
Thank you. It has been moved and seconded that the application be approved, subject to the reserved matters coming to members, and a wish that members and the public be involved in consultation. Hearing officer could take that on board as a wish of members. Mr. Whittingham, do you want to comment on that? Mr. Mansell?
Thank you, Chair. I can certainly comment that there's going to be a whole evolution of processes. If members accept the scheme, it isn't a green light for the developer to do whatever they want. There's all of the aspects that I've noted down that that officers will need to address with the developers. There'll be a whole process needed of engagement and consultation. That's both on what Victoria Square can look like and feel like, how the cenotaph can be improved, and we've already committed to engage with and been in touch with the War Memorials Trust and the British Legion over the cenotaph. But we need to do that as part of the detailed design process. There'll be similar to the consultation exercise on the outline application. We will happily engage with the Civic Trust and the public on the detailed design, the need to support businesses surrounding the site and within the site, and how to maximise opportunities to deliver new routes through to Bradshaw Gate, for example. The clogs policy that I mentioned will mean that we've got to deliver as much off-site storage space as possible to minimise the impact on the town centre streets. So that's something that the council needs to look into, and we can't have all of those decisions made prior to us bringing this application forward to committee, but they're all on the to-do list before members see the final scheme that's going to come forward and all of the detail that surrounds it. There's an awful lot of work to do, and we're happy to engage with all stakeholders to ensure that this is the best scheme for Bolton. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Whittingham. Members have heard the proposal that we approve the application. Members are now going to vote for approval or against approval. The application before us with the caveats. Mrs. Ridge.
Thank you, Chair. So, Councillor Allen.
For.
Councillor Ayub.
4.
Councillor Connor,
4.
Councillor Darvish,
4.
Councillor Dean,
4.
Councillor Howarth,
4.
Councillor Hayes,
4.
Councillor Hornby,
4.
Councillor Mistry,
4.
Councillor Peel,
4.
Councillor Radcliffe,
4.
Councillor Sanders,
4.
Councillor Sherrington,
4.
Councillor Walsh,
4.
Councillor Waters,
4.
Councillor Newall,
4.
and Councillor Wright.
4.
That application is approved.
Thank you very much indeed. We will move then to the second application, but before we come to that, Mrs. Ridge, you need to contact speakers. Councillor Allen. Councillor Allen, do you want to speak on this?
Yes, thank you,
Very
Chair.
interesting.
I was waiting for the red box. This is the
Right.
application, Manchester Road, Kersley. Yep.
It is indeed.
I will log out and withdraw and await a phone call. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
So, Chair, just to let you know that we're just waiting for the supporter to dial in.
Thank you.
Vicky, it's Mark. Am I actually logged? Can you see me now? Am I logged in? Right, lovely. Okay. Thank you.
Chair, I think we have got the support. The supporter has just arrived.
Okay, thank you. Can I just check, Mark Harrison, that you're able to hear us?
I can, thanks. Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Thank you very much indeed. We come then to the application at 58 Manchester Road, Kersley. Mr. Allen, I believe you're speaking to this one. Alex Allen.
Yes, Chair, thank you. Just like to draw members' attention to the supplementary schedule of supplementary information where is shown the bin store detail for the proposed residential development. Also, in terms of the presentation in front of members now, just like to draw your attention to the 3D image of the apartment block when viewed from Manchester Road, which perhaps gives a better reflection of the elevational detail. Thank you. The application site is allocated for housing within the council's development plan. Whilst members will appreciate that the site is also an existing social club and former bowling green. It forms part of a wider housing allocation. It also encompasses the adjacent Moss Rose Mill. The application is brought before members at the request of Councillor Cunningham, and as over 5 objections have also been received. The proposed 1 and 2 bedroom apartments would be accommodated within a 3-storey flat roof building fronting Manchester Road with access off also off Manchester Road. Bolton at Home would be delivering all apartments for social rent. The proposed development would therefore be 100% affordable and not subject to any planning obligations. Officers have found that there will be some harm to the outlook of the residents of 16 Holcombe Close owing to the scale and siting of the apartment building, but it is not considered that their overall amenity would be unduly harmed, given that there would be no direct overlooking or undue loss of light. The size of the 5 proposed 2-bed apartments falls slightly short of the nationally described space standards. It is recognised that the amount of usable communal open space for future residents is limited. It is, however, considered, given the highly sustainable location of the development, and as Bolton at Home find the room sizes to be acceptable, that the proposed development would not unduly harm the amenity of future residents. The council's highway engineers have raised no objections to the proposed location of the access or the amount of on-street parking, and have found that the proposed development would have limited impact on the operational capacity of the surrounding highway network. A number of trees within the site are to be lost as part of the development. However, these are found to be of low value. In addition, additional tree planting and shrub planting is proposed within the development. Members are therefore recommended to approve this application subject to the suggested conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. I have 2 ward councillors who have registered to speak. Councillor Cunningham. Councillor Cunningham, you've got 5 minutes to address the committee, please.
Thank you. In brief then, I'm urging you to reject the planning application for the erection of what I see as 24 flats built below national standards with inadequate parking, a lack of amenity, no children's play area, no section 106 monies, road safety issues, parking and congestion issues, and damage to mature trees. I believe the raison d'etre of the officer's recommendation for acceptance is intrinsically flawed, and it's driven by house building targets to boost the supply of affordable housing in the borough, regardless of the unsuitability in terms of the number, size, quality or amenity of this location. It seeks to maximise the number of properties for no other reason than to make it financially viable for a developer rather than to provide a small number of quality houses of the right size to be able to get more onto the same footprint. The application concentrates mainly on the planning technicalities just to justify why the application should be approved by offering mitigations for the inherent defects I believe that are in there, as to why this application is detrimental to the existing community and future residents. As both a resident and a councillor for Kersley with local knowledge, I believe what you're really being asked to approve is a development that will be detrimental to the local community in ensuring the unnecessary and permanent loss of valuable social facilities. It will ensure that the building of flats, which according to the officer's report are simplistic and uninspiring in design, smaller than the national standards by 3 square metres in the case of 2-bedroom flats and by 5 square metres on 1-bedroom flats. And I fail to see any validity in the mitigation offered in paragraph 11 of the executive summary, where it says, it is, however, considered, given the highly sustainable location of the development and as Bolton at Home find the room sizes to be acceptable, that the proposed development would not unduly harm the amenity of future residents. The question must be asked, when did Bolton at Home gain the power to override national standards? And why would they do so to the detriment of the people that will be under their tenancy? It's abhorrent to me that they should countenance new developments being built below national standards. Surely the correct approach is not to build anything to the minimum standard, but to exceed them, where at all to give you the possibility of future-proofing the buildings, which will be around and will impact on the quality of lives of people in the area for years to come. A classic example of this, of course, is the COVID-19, which actually now requires you to try and provide more living space for obvious health and safety reasons. Further, it should be noted that Bolton at Home is being used to undermine any possibility of the council getting access to Section 106 monies for the affected community in Kearsley. Paragraph 5 of the executive summary states that Bolton at Home, a registered housing association, will be delivering all the apartments for social rent. The proposed development would therefore be 100% affordable and not subject to any planning obligations, Section 106, etc. And it refers you to paragraph 79 of the main body of the report, which further states that as the proposed development is for 100% affordable housing, there's no policy requirement for the applicant to contribute to any other infrastructure obligations. This development is going to create, I think, a pressure cooker environment due to too many people being cramped into a small area with a lack of amenity in contravention of the general design principles, which state there should be 18 square metres of communal amenity for each flat, which would total 432 square metres for this development. But the developer is only offering half of that. And this development is basically going to be without any kind of dedicated communal area, because that actual square meterage is spread across the whole development. So there's no communal area which they can all benefit from. This pressure cooker environment's got the potential, I believe, to create tension and social unrest that could all too easily ferment into antisocial behaviour, domestic violence and abuse. There's no play area for children, and the mitigation offered in paragraph 55 of the main report, that the development's got within 6 minutes walk of Kearsley Park, just doesn't cut the mustard. Anybody with local knowledge knows you do not go in Kearsley Park even in daylight if you can help it. I was there recently to a meeting of the bowling club, and we had to get the police out with off-road bikers cutting it up and all sorts of things going on in there. It's not safe to walk in, so they won't have the use of that amenity. The building will be taller than the other buildings by a substantial amount, being 3-storey. And although the report does call up Holcombe Close number 16, in relation to the levels of the land and it being overlooked, etc., it does affect more than 16 Holcombe Close. And I only 2 days ago had a complaint from 12A Holcombe Close, which was up for sale, as is number 16, and the sale has just fallen through, and the estate agent has said that the buyers pulled out when they've become aware of the proposed development. So this has got potential to have a really detrimental effect on very, well looked after housing in that area, and perhaps plunging prices. It'll impede the neighbouring businesses and residents. It has insufficient parking, 21 spaces for 24 flats. But if each flat had just 2 cars, which is more often than not the case, that would be 48 spaces needed. And if the larger flats with 2 bedrooms had more than that, it could be...
You've come to the end of your 5 minutes. Can you sum up in one sentence, please?
Yeah, I believe that this is detrimental to the existing amenity and enjoyment for the existing community, and offers very little in terms of decent housing for the proposed tenants coming forward, because it's been built below national standards, and I would ask you to reject it.
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. Can I now invite Councillor Heslop forward, Councillor, please, and remind you, Councillor Heslop, likewise, you have got 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I would hope that many of the concerns with this development are apparent to members. Having said this, I'd like the opportunity to bring to the committee's attention my own views of the application, particularly relative to the amenities and services in Kearsley. And for ease, I've quoted the reference number from the officer's report where appropriate. Point 2 of the officer's report, it is acknowledged that there are a significant shortfall of suitable accommodation in Kearsley and Stonecliff areas. However, it could be argued that much of this problem lies with the proposed registered provider, Bolton at Home. Instead of being housed locally, many people who have grown up and have families in Kearsley have been forced to accept tenancies in far-flung parts of the borough. Similarly, people from miles away are being allocated Bolton at Home properties in Kearsley, despite wanting to stay closer to their relatives. To reinforce this point, a 45-year-old man who was born in Kearsley, grew up in Kearsley, and despite himself recovering from a liver transplant, needs to provide care for his elderly mother in Kearsley. He actually came 85th out of 87 in his bid for a 1-bedroom flat in Kearsley, and that was in February 2020. and the applicant actually has been on the list for years. I believe that if the proposed development is approved, then it should be conditional that 100% of the proposed tenants are either from Kersley or actually returning to Kersley. Points 27 and 55 of the officer's report points to the council's core strategy, CCG 1.3, that aims to enhance and safeguard parks and civic amenities. I've previously distributed photographs of Kersley Park, and it should be noted from this report, part 59, as justification for disregarding general design principles. The report states that not only does the proposed communal space amount to half of the recommended 432 square kilometres, this proposed communal space is inside buildings rather than outside. The report does not state the actual outside communal space, and the alternative detailed in the report, Kersley Park, other than a small children's play area, is nothing more than a dog walking, dog toilet facility, and it's used entirely for that purpose, or as Councillor Cunningham said, off-road biking. It should also be noted that the proposed site is on a former bowling green, and whilst this may have been 10 years ago, many of the former bowlers moved to Kersley Park's adjoining bowling club, which is up to full capacity for its 2 greens. Members should be aware also that it was recently proposed that one of these greens would close due to cuts. Despite having a housing stock of nearly 900 in Kersley, or 4.6 of the total housing stock, Bolton at Home does not have adequate communal facilities for these tenants. There are no civic facilities in Kersley, no library, no health centre, no sports centre, as these have all been torn down and sold off. The land has been sold off. The only possible places for any sizable public meeting in the town of 14,000 are our churches. Then the next point, if the proposed application is allowed to proceed without changes to the on-site external communal spaces, then conditions should include the complete makeover of Kersley Park, irrespective of what the report says in relation to the 106. And in addition, Bolton at Home should make space from existing stock, the availability of sizable community facilities, along with furnishing of such facilities. Finally, my point is in relation to the communal areas. Bolton at Home charge a fixed £1.45 per week ground maintenance fee, and this is to cover the cost of maintaining communal gardens. Other housing associations charge considerably more than this amount, but provide a much superior service that are normally scheme specific and cost neutral. Of the 24 properties at this site, the proposed charge would raise £34.80 per week. And although the communal garden area may be functional, it may not provide an aesthetically enhanced view or amenity that could be available, albeit at cost. It's important to remember that communal gardening is an eligible service charge, and if residents are in receipt of housing benefit, they would not pay anything towards this eligible service charge, whether it's £1.45 a week or £5 per week. For residents that are able to pay their rent, I believe that...
Heads up, you've come to your 5 minutes. 1 sentence to sum up, please.
If this application is to go ahead, I believe that the conditions should include an undertaking to provide a bespoke communal garden facility, with the cost being fully met by residents or as previously detailed benefits. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haswell. We turn now to Mark Harrison, who is a supporter, speaking on behalf of the application. Ms. Harrison, you've got 3 minutes, and then I'll invite questions from members.
Hi, thanks. I've got a formal statement which we prepared before and which I'll read out, and then I will address a couple of the points that have been raised by Councillor Cunningham and Councillor Heslop. So for the formal statement, it's just a review of our position. It begins, the proposed development at Kearsley Social Club will provide 24 generous 1- and 2-bed apartments. This will replace an existing social club and bowling green which has been underused for some time. The financial viability of the existing use will only have been further jeopardised by the current restrictions on social gatherings. It is therefore an opportune time for the proposed development to come forward, as it will prevent a further decline on this part of the High Street. The new apartments will be made available to the local community as affordable homes through Bolton at Home. They will be high quality, desirable dwellings which will bring a stylish, contemporary feel to Manchester Road. The building will include high levels of insulation in the structure, which will translate into low energy bills for future residents. An ample parking area is provided, and the landscape grounds will be supplemented by balconies and patios. The development is financially supported by Homes England and will thus bring further outside investment into the local area. That was the end of the statement we prepared. I just wanted to pick up on a couple of the other things which were raised. In terms of the specifics of the apartment sizes, the proposed apartments achieve 85% of the nationally described space standards, and this is the generally accepted standard for funding by Homes England. The nationally described space standards themselves are government aspirations rather than specific requirements for new developments to meet them. In fact, there are very, very few new developments that do meet them because they are very generously sized, and many would say they were oversized for practical purposes. The height, I think Councillor Cunningham also mentioned the height of the new building. I've just done a quick measurement while we've been talking, and the proposed new building will be around about the same height as the ridge height of number 72 Manchester Road, which is next door. So those were just the couple of additional points that I wanted to pick up on following the statements by the councillors. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. I've got 3 members thus far who've indicated they wish to pose a question. Councillor Hornby.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. It's in relation to a bugbear of mine, and it's happening time and time again. Section 106 monies. It's not necessary for social housing providers to provide Section 106 money. I'm sorry, that's not the case. Development at Horwich by Bolton at Home, Section 106 money has been agreed. Great Places at Park Road, Little Lever, Section 106 money has been agreed. Why is Bolton at Home not going to be paying Section 106 money for this application? Thank you.
If that question was directed to me, I'm afraid I couldn't specifically answer that. It would something that Bolton at Home would need to respond to, I'm afraid.
Okay. Could we ask later on that Alex Allen addresses that issue?
If you want to come back to officers later, Councillor Hornby, you'll have that opportunity.
Thank you.
Councillor Howard.
Thank you, Chair. I'm waiting for the red line. I'm sorry, Chair.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Mr. Harrison, I want to ask you about the comments you made about local community. I'm hesitant because you've said that you're not Bolton at Home, but I'll try. So after you'd spoken about the description of the 24 apartments being generous, you then did go on to say that the apartments will be made available to the local community. Now, I'm thinking back to some statement that we got from one of the ward councillors, Councillor Heslop, who described this issue, I'm afraid, with the way that people who want Bolton at Home social housing make bids, that it seems that the system that he's come across there, just the general system, means that a gentleman who is a Kersley person wants that type of Kersley accommodation was coming way down the list in February 2020. So I was wanting to get more information as to how would that happen, because you see, I'm interpreting your words local community to mean Kersley. Is that what you do mean, or do you, does the statement really just mean Bolton Borough? I need you to tell me any more you can, please, on that. Thank you.
As it happens, Councillor Howarth, I can give you a little bit more clarity on that, because I've got in front of me an email which was sent by Paul Philbin. In fact, the planning officer probably has it as well, but I can read out the local lettings policy which Bolton at Home will be employing in this instance. So it basically says, Bolton at Home will look to operate a local lettings policy for the scheme with the approval of the council, with a view to allocating 80% of first lets to the scheme to people with a local connection, i.e. living in the area, working within the area, or providing care / support to somebody in the area, with the area being defined as Kearsley. There may also be preference for economically active applied also. The key is that any local lettings policy needs to be approved by the council's housing options team to ensure it is fair and appropriate. What we also can't do is to hold back properties until somebody meeting the requirements is found. If less than 80% after advertising / verifying, then will still be allocated. Essentially, that's the statement that I think they put forward in response to the concerns that have been raised by the councillor previously. So I'm not sure whether that meets all your queries as well.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Waters, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just waiting for the red line. Okay, thank you. Mr. Harrison, can you just explain in a little bit more detail, going back to Councillor Howarth mentioned it, when you use the terminology generous. So in terms of the size of the flats, we know that they are going to be around about 15% smaller, and we also are aware that the communal areas are going to be 50% smaller than they should be. So in terms of your terminology in the terms of generous, can you explain a bit more why they feel they are generous?
I think the term generous in this instance, I would use that to indicate that it is typical for developments of this kind to follow these sizes. You will, if you were to look at a cross-section of developments proposed by different providers, be they private housing providers or social housing providers in different boroughs across the country, basically the kind of things that we often work on. These are reasonable sized properties for their nature, and there is the nationally described space standards, which has been previously referred to, and as I've indicated, they are government aspirations more than requirements. There's no specific need to comply with those, and for social housing, what's generally happened as a result is that Homes England, who fund social housing, have kind of come to the conclusion that the sizes that the NDSS, as it's called, refers to aren't financially viable for social housing providers in most parts of the country to follow, and so they do accept that a reasonable size of property is around about 85% of the NDSS, provided that meets what they call the old HQI standards, housing quality indicators, which was the guidelines that the housing associations used to work to prior to Homes England, when it was the Homes and Communities Agency. So essentially, the housing sizes that we are using here are typical for this kind of development, and so and they are also, in terms of the generousness of the sizes, they are also larger than many similar developments that you would get if you were in the private sector. So I think that's where the word generous has come from in relation to the sizes of the apartments.
So basically, the what the relevant agencies are saying is because there's social housing, it's acceptable for anybody in social housing to have a smaller, less adequate space. I know that's generally that's what the agencies are saying. I know that's not necessarily what you're saying. You're giving us an explanation as to where it's come from, but that's in essence what it is.
It's like just from the way that was put, though, Councillor, I just say it made it sound as though the social housing that's being provided either in this or in another development might be smaller than a private housing development. In fact, it's the other way around. Usually the social housing developments are larger and more generous in size than the private housing developments. Obviously you can get some very large private housing developments which are very generous in size, but you pay a lot of money for them. But if you were to buy a typical Barratt home, it would be smaller than your typical social housing, than the typical home provided by a social housing provider.
But not in this case.
So in this case, I would expect that the sizes of the apartments to be at least as large as any that were provided by a private housing developer on a site next door, for example. And probably I would expect our apartment sizes to be larger than any that they were providing, because social housing providers do have certain standards that they need to follow and achieve. Whereas a private housing developer doesn't have any standards at all. There are these nationally described space standards which the government has laid down, but it's widely recognised across the industry that they are hugely optimistic in terms of the sizes of properties that they suggest people should be providing. They're just simply unrealistic, and this isn't to do with Bolton. It's not to do with this particular job. It's just to do with what the government has put forward as a recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Sherrington.
Thank you, Chair. What I'm going to be asking Mr Harrison about is I have a thing about flat roofs in Bolton, why people are still having flat roofs. I don't know, because we usually finish up then that we've got a maintenance problem forever, and I just wondered why it not got a slight tilt on it, if nothing else. The other thing that I wanted to ask about was a lot of what Bolton Autumn are doing now, they're actually putting solar panels on the top of the flats for the use of the people who are actually in those flats. It's a benefit to the people who live there. And I just wondered why this has not been put in as part of the application, because I would have thought putting it in at this stage would be a better idea rather than doing it at a later stage. So I was just wondering, obviously, Mr Harrison, you're not Bolton at home, I don't think, but I was just wondering if anybody has said anything to you from Bolton at home regarding the idea of putting on solar panels on the roof. Thank you.
Just to address those 2 points separately, the flat roof, I would say that the flat roof technologies that are available now do have or can have quite long lifespans, 25 years upwards, and they come with a guarantee to support that. In part, it's down to a question of appearance, and I know some people prefer pitched roofs. Obviously, a pitched roof does raise the height of the building a little bit, whereas a flat roof keeps it lower. The kind of modern architectural style that we're kind of going for does more lend itself towards a flat roof. The other thing that often dictates these things is the shape of the building in plan. If it's a nice rectangle or a square, then it's quite easy to get a pitched roof on it. But if it's got steps and recesses and things like that, then it's much harder to get a pitched roof working over it, because of the way the geometry of the roof works and where the eaves fall. So I think for that combination of reasons, we went for a flat roof in this instance. Going on to the solar panel question, it's not been raised with me, I will be honest. It's not to say that it couldn't be provided. There obviously is a cost to this kind of provision, and so whether there's a financial viability for putting it in this instance, there's often a dependency on whether there's any south-facing prospect and whether there's any overshading from trees. Those are things that can affect the viability of social panels. In this instance, I thought they probably would be viable. There shouldn't be any major reason why you couldn't put them on, but it's not something that's been raised so far with us.
Thank you, Ms. Harrison.
Can I just come back? Sorry, Chair, can I just come back on that? Okay. When I was saying about the roof, I was not asking you to put a pitch roof on. All I was saying is that if there's a slight incline, then the water would go in one particular way. I've seen these things where you get 10 years guarantee and all the rest of it, and 25-year guarantee. Yes, and you finish up that you've got building workers on the roof all the time, because quite simply things don't work out like that. And the trouble with water is once it gets through, it's trying to find out where it has got through. That's the great difficulty. And all I was saying is that if there was a slight incline on one side of the roof, it actually takes the water off. That's all I'm saying. But it's up to Bolton at home. If they want to have a maintenance problem forever, then that's fine. But I'm thinking about the solar panels. I was just thinking that if you wanted to take this back, because quite simply, it's a lot cheaper to do it now than what it is later on. And they are actually putting solar panels on flats in other areas. So I was just thinking that it would make sense.
Thank you, Mr. Carrington. I didn't see the question. I didn't see the question of that, but I think your point is made. Thank you, Ms. Harrison. That concludes questioning. We come then to questions to officers. Councillor Hornby.
Thank you, Chair. I refer again to what I asked the applicant with regard to Section 106 monies. Can we go into more detail, please, as to why this scheme is not contributing any Section 106 money when other similar developments have done in the past with Bolton Home and indeed with Great Places? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Allen.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, just generally speaking, members will be aware policy IPC 1, which is in the core strategy, talks about provision of primary health, Section 106 monies for primary healthcare facilities, education, affordable housing, public art. Well, the policy guidance is that affordable housing provision doesn't make provision for any of those aspects. Where I think what the point you're getting at, say, for example, the Park Road scheme in Little Ever, the proposal was by Great Places in off Highfield Road. Those did offer a very modest amount for improvements to local play areas, etc. And that was in relation to in order to comply with core strategy policy CG1 point 4, and that is specifically where developments, residential developments on informal green spaces in the urban area are allowed, and so the loss of, in effect, of the informal green space, so grassed area, for example, that people kick balls around, etc. on, that would be provided or offset by improvements elsewhere in a local area, and that's to say that's occurred in Little Ever and in other parts of the borough as well. So in this instance, in terms of this application, whilst there is a bowling green or a former bowling green, that forms part of the social club, and it's not technically defined as informal open space, which is why the report does not offer any, or the officer doesn't offer any reference to contributions. Having said that, the applicant, the case officer has been in contact with the developer in this instance, and they have offered a sum of £3,000 to be, obviously, which could be spent at the nearby Kersley Park to improve facilities there. Obviously, it is a relatively modest amount, but as I say, comparable areas in Bolton, where a housing association has been involved, we've only been able to achieve modest sums of money to improve local facilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Councillor Darvish.
Thank you, Chair. Alex, I refer to paragraph 47 in the report. It mentions the southern corner of the apartment building would only be approximately 11.2 metres away from the northern corner of 16 Holcombe Close. So what is the actual shortfall in the interface distance? And also, you know, the interface policy itself, does it take into account shortfall of the actual shortfall between, for example, a house and a 3-storey townhouse, or a building and a 24 apartment building?
Alex, you're just on mute.
Thank you. Sorry about that, councillors. Yeah, paragraph 47 talks about the relationship of number 16 Holcombe Close with the proposed apartment block. And it says that it's approximately 11.2 metres away. In terms of the interface, if you turn to page 25, which shows the relationship and the distance perhaps clearer than just in the text. In terms of the SBD, the General Design Principle SBD, that talks about where you've got the relationship between an existing property and a proposed property, which are basically full on next or side by side. So if there's a main room window opposite or directly facing a blank gable, the distance is 13.5 metres, and for every additional story you go up an additional 3 metres distance requirement. The officer in this case is saying that relationship isn't direct, as you can see from page 25. So that there isn't a specific requirement for a distance in the SBD, that the distance is in relation to distances for windows, window to window, where there's an oblique relationship. The distance should be 17 metres. The window in the eastern elevation of the property, which overlooks number 16, where you've got that 11-metre distance, that is a secondary window and a very small window to the lounge. The main window is in the southern elevation, where you've got a Juliet balcony, and again that relationship is extremely oblique to number 16. And the officer is also in the report states that the level difference between the proposed development and the garden and the finished floor level number 16 is such that because it's a bungalow, it'll be a lot lower. I think there's about a 2-metre difference anyway in between the proposed level of the development and the rear garden area of number 16. Plus, you've got a 2.1 metre high fence on the application site. So in effect, any potential overlooking issue will be mitigated by, I suppose, the relationship with the windows and also the level differences and the fencing. Does that answer your question, councillor?
Thank you, Alex. Yeah, just thank you.
Thank you. Come now to debate. Councillor Newall.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I would like to speak in this because on the face of it, this application, obviously it's in the allocation plan and the principle of residential development has been established in 2014. So on the face of it, this is quite a righteous application. And I don't have an objection to a development there per se, but without repeating what's already been said, I would have wanted to highlight the lack of amenity space, the size of the 2-bedroom apartments and the 1-bedroom apartments. You know, that a 1-bed apartment is okay for one person, but it's 5 square meters short if 2 people live in it. So all those things, you know, I think are valid objections. And also, you know, it will have an impact on number 16 and other houses on that row. And it seems to me that if this development went ahead but was smaller, you could address a lot of those problems. You could certainly address the problem of lack of amenity space. And if that offending block in the southeast corner was taken off, you'd also address the problems to a great extent of this affecting number 16 and the other houses on that row. So as this development is affordable housing and it isn't for profit, I'm wondering, could this not be taken away and looked at again and this development come back and in a smaller capacity, say 3 or 4 flats less, and address some of these problems that have been raised and again today. I welcome housing in Kersley and I welcome this kind of housing, 1-bedroom apartments, 2-bedroom flats. They are, you know, they are welcome. There are a section of our community that this kind of housing is really valid. But I do think with a bit more thought, you could tick a few more boxes with this application. So I'd like to know what colleagues think about that, please, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peel.
Thank you, Chair. I really welcome Councillor Newell's contribution there. I was beginning to think, after listening to the 2 ward councillors and questions from other councillors, that the entire issue of social housing had been completely forgotten about, because this is the key issue that both ward councillors who addressed us failed to actually pick up on. There is a massive problem of social housing with a demand for social housing far outstripping the supply, and the report identifies the fact that in the Kersley area in particular there is a low turnover. In other words, they are settled communities, not transient communities, coupled with a high demand, which is the perfect storm, isn't it, when you have a lack of social housing. And with respect to Councillor Heslop, he actually said that this is Bolton at Home's fault. Of course it's not Bolton at Home's fault. This is decades of underinvestment in social housing by whatever government. I'm not making a political point. Decades of underinvestment in social housing, pushing people, often against their will, into the private rented sector, or to be saddled with mortgages, often mortgages that people can't afford. So the entire option of socially rented becomes some kind of, I think a previous Prime Minister, Mrs. Thatcher, described it as a sign of failure. And that's the peculiar British disease we have with our attitude towards social housing. So the most vital point here is the fact that Kersley, as well as every other part of this borough, has a lack of social housing. That is the starting off point on this. I was more impressed with what Councillor Heslop said, to be honest, but both councillors said some. Well, I quite frankly found embarrassing things about Kersley Park. I would never speak about an amenity in my ward in such a way unless I knew that I had completely done everything in my power to try to address these issues. The ward councillors need to be working with local communities to address these issues they've brought to the attention of committee. And we know here that there is a small section 106 of £3,000, which I would suggest ward councillors speak to officers about how to use that to create stronger communities in that area, because parks only get better and parks are only saved if people who live around those parks use them for what they were intended. If people walk away from them, then antisocial behaviour will take over. They should not walk away from this issue, and they should do everything in their power to try to resolve these issues. I do sympathise, as I said, with what Councillor Heslop said about he did address it in an incorrect way, the lack of social housing, but he did talk about having a local lettings policy, and I actually indicated in chat whether or not I was allowed to ask a councillor a question, and it seems I'd forgotten. I'm not allowed to ask a councillor a question, but I was going to ask Councillor Heslop, would he be supporting the application if there was a local lettings policy? That seemed to be his primary concern. It was later confirmed in the meeting by the applicant that there is indeed a local lettings policy. However, I can't find it in the report. I may have missed it. If it isn't in the report, Chair, in moving this application, which I will, I would like that to be a condition. I then got to the point where I listened to Councillor Newell. So if there is a desire from other members of committee to actually defer the application, take the application away and have a look at the amenity space in particular, then I would withdraw my move to support the application and go for deferral instead. It's not on the grounds, as Councillor Newell said, about the size of the apartments. We need to step out of our own personal bubbles for a moment and understand that there is significant demand from local people for these size of apartments. The demand is there. It might not be our personal first preference, but for a lot of people, for a lot of single people, a lot of people just starting off on the ladder, they want this type of apartment. They demand it. We need to build more of them because, you know, that demand is out there. I'm more sympathetic with the lack of amenity space outside. I'm more sympathetic with what Councillor Heslop said there and what Councillor Newell addressed, because I now think that house builders and architects, etc., need to actually look at the world in a COVID situation for many years to come. None of us can forget the scenes of police officers moving people off parks because they weren't supposed to be gathering on parks. But we all realised at the back of our minds that people were going out to sit on parks because they were living in apartments with no amenity space. And I think in a post-COVID world where lockdown restrictions and social distancing may well be here for a considerable amount of time, we need to seriously take these issues into account about adequate amenity space where there are apartments. I have formally moved the application, Chair, but if I don't get a seconder, which is fine, I would be happy to withdraw that and support Councillor Newell's deferral.
Mr. Allen, I think you want to comment at this point.
Thank you, Chair. Just in response to Councillor Peel's request for a condition regarding the local lettings policy, unfortunately, I don't think that would be possible from a planning perspective. That it wouldn't necessarily meet the tests for insertion of a planning condition. I don't know if Mrs. Raby's got any comments on that, but I don't think we could insist on a local lettings policy condition in this instance.
No, I agree. In my view, it wouldn't meet the test for a planning condition. It's something that could be raised with the applicants, and it sounds like it's something that they would be willing to accommodate, but not something that we would impose by condition. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Peel, I think you want to respond to that.
Chair, there have been situations in the past, especially in townships, where local lettings policies have been applied to new builds. It may not be a planning condition as such. It may well just be an undertaking from the housing supplier, in this case Bolton at Home. Bolton at Home appear to have already made some kind of undertaking. The applicant said, I've not seen it myself, it's not in the report. That just needs that needs to be firmed up as an undertaking by Bolton at Home, and then that would satisfy my request for a condition.
Thank you. Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, there's been a lot of really good and valid points. Exactly what I think probably most of us are thinking. I think Councillor Heslop was very clear in his opening speech, where he was talking about the person who was on the register for a property and came 85th. So I think he clearly does understand that there is a high demand for social housing, and he did suggest that. I'm concerned about the sizes of the properties, and I do get, and I understand the desperate need for social housing. But we, as a planning authority, we have turned down applications in the past because they haven't been adequate to meet the requirements of the size and the space. And I'm just worried that we set a precedent going forward in approving something which we know has been mentioned within the planning application, and also in terms of the report by the officers. In talking about the communal space outside, Councillor Peel and Councillor Newall very clearly said, and we are in unprecedented times. People, we don't know nobody knows exactly what's going on with COVID-19, and to have something reduced by 50% for residents when you've got 24 blocks, 24 flats that could potentially be 48 people, and those with 2 bedrooms will be considerably more. So I do think there is a massive need in terms of the communal areas, which does need seriously looking at. And one of the things I was going to suggest is exactly the same as Councillor Newall, is to defer the application, for it to go back to Bolton at Home and for them to relook at it. I think we're all very clear that we are desperate for social housing. Nobody is saying don't build there. That is not what we're saying. What we're saying is make it adequate for the people that are going to live there and reside there, because at the end of the day, we also have a duty of care and responsibility to the people that will be moving into those properties. So I would definitely second deferment.
I have 4 more members indicating wish to speak. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to second Councillor Newell, but Councillor Watts has already done so. It's good that Bolton at Home are building social housing, because we are in desperate need of it. But I am very concerned about the size of it, and people that usually accommodate social housing, maybe elderly or people with health or mental health problems, and with the minimal size of the flats, it is going to affect on people's health, and with no outdoor space. So I would like to see this be deferred, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Dean.
Thank you, Chair.
I was initially minded to support this application, like council appeal, but having listened to the local councillors, I think it's, you know, Councillor Cunningham and Councillor Heslop came up with some valid points, but the most interesting comments that were made, I think were made by Councillor Newell, and I think it's in the past, even in the past few weeks and months, we've sent applications back just to be tweaked, you know, to be looked at, and that's worked out quite successful for applications. So I don't think there's any harm in doing the same with this application as well. So I'll support deferment as well.
Thank you. Councillor Hayes.
Councillor Hayes, you're muted.
I did unmute. Perhaps somebody's got the ability to shut me up.
Not me.
I was going to second deferral, but I'm glad that's already been done. I think we can make things more acceptable for the houses in Holcombe Crescent, and I think we can make the size a little bit better to meet our aspirations. I would hate this not to be approved eventually in some form, because social housing is absolutely necessary. And the final point to make, we managed to negotiate, this is in my own ward of Smithills, a policy of local people being housed first for some new houses on Johnson Fold. So I know they can be very amenable. I accept it's not right to include it as a planning condition, but I certainly think there should be discussions that we support that idea. So deferral, please. Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Sherrington.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to go for deferral as well on this. I was going to go for acceptance because, quite simply, it is definitely needed in Kearsley. They're short of this sort of provision over in Kearsley, and but I did have a problem with the fact that the person who'd come, Mr. Harrison, sort of said that the guidelines that have been proposed by to the planning authorities from the government are not there for, you know, they're just there to be looked at. They're not really to be taken any notice of, it would appear. And I do have a problem with that, because I've always thought of that as being minimum standards, what are proposed, not maximum, and not something that you tweak. I would actually like it to be something that we start from, and which obviously has not been the starting point in this particular application. I mean, Bolton at Home, I mean, when it was the council's properties, it was looked upon that if you got a council property, you knew that you were getting something bigger than what anybody else was going to provide, like, for instance, housing associations and so on. And now it's getting that way that, you know, if you want something from Bolton at Home, it's the lowest common denominator. And I don't see that as being something that Bolton at Home should be proud of. I think it's something that they've, you know, what they should be working towards is providing something that people feel proud of, that they've actually been able to get this property, even though they're probably on hard times when they've actually got it. And I mean, you know, we're here really to try and encourage people's aspirations, and we're not going to do that by giving them, you know, let's stick them all in a box. It doesn't work like that. We've got to try and motivate people to do best with their lives, and we're not going to do that by creating things like this. And also, like Councillor Dean said, it was just only a few weeks ago we actually turned down an application for being too small, and it wasn't a lot different than this. And they went away and they came back with something that proved to be a lot superior, and they will have a better response to the people who probably want to go and live in those properties. So we're actually helping Bolton at Home here by actually deferring this, because in the long term they're going to get people, good tenants, because it all relates to what people are actually moving into. The people won't want to move into something that is too small and insignificant, and also that you'll finish up then with half the neighbours will have antisocial behaviour problems, and you won't have any good tenants. So I don't think that's what Bolton at Home have ever worked towards. So I'm quite surprised that they've actually done this, really. So yes, I will be supporting deferment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Darvish. Last speaker.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief. I'm happy to support the deferment on this application. The truth is, I don't think they'll be able to come back and reduce the apartments, and that's all because financially, probably won't stack up. For me, the bigger issue was the interface distance between the building and number 16 Holcombe Close, simply because there's a big difference between living close to a three-story house and living close to an apartment building with 24 people in. So I'm happy to support the deferment.
Thank you. It has been moved and seconded that this stand is deferred for further discussions with the applicant. Mrs. Ridge, can we take the vote, please? You're voting for deferment or against?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So, Councillor Allen?
Withdrawn.
Oh, sorry, yes, sorry. Councillor Ayub?
For.
Councillor Connor? Councillor Connor? Councillor Darvish?
For.
Councillor Dean?
For.
Councillor Howarth?
For.
Councillor Hayes?
For.
Councillor Hornby?
For.
Councillor Mistry?
For.
Councillor Peel?
For.
Councillor Radcliffe?
For.
Councillor Sanders?
For.
Councillor Sherrington?
For.
Councillor Walsh?
For.
Councillor Waters?
For.
Councillor Newall?
For.
Councillor Wright?
For.
The application is deferred.
Thank you. We come then to the final application on page 89. Mrs. Ridge, do you need to get 2 ward councillors?
I do, yes, and I need to give it ring Councillor Allen to bring him back into the meeting. I'll let you know when everybody's back in.
Give you a few minutes, thank you.
Chair, can we just check if we've got Councillor Brady and Councillor Sylvester, please?
Oh, thanks, Helen. Thanks.
Councillor Brady?
You got both.
Councillor Sylvester? Councillor Allen. Councillor Brady, are you with us yet?
I am, thank you, Chair.
Right. Councillor
Yes,
Allen, you're back.
I'm back.
Councillor Sylvester.
Yes, can you hear me, Chair?
I can. Thank you very much. We have all
Thank
three
you.
councillors in that case. And so we come to the final application on page 89, and it's for the siting of a 20-metre high phase 7 monopole on land at Chorley New Road. Geordie Turton, I think, is presenting this one. Ms. Turton.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I'm just waiting for the box. Thank you. The application proposes the erection of a replacement 20-metre high telecoms mast with 8 cabinets. 6 of these are new cabinets, 2 are to be retained. The mast will be sited approximately 7 metres to the west of an existing 20-metre high monopole. As the proposed mast is put forward as a replacement to this, a condition is recommended for the removal of the existing mast and cabinets. The mast is not considered to have any greater impact on the character and appearance of the area than the existing. There will be an additional amount of clutter at street level due to the additional cabinets. However, highway engineers do not consider this to pose any detrimental impact on pedestrian manoeuvrability. 2 letters of objection have been received. Details are on page 94 of the report. The application is before committee at the request of Councillor Sylvester. The material planning reasons for this request are detailed on page 94 of the report. The application has an officer recommendation of approval subject to conditions. Members' attention is drawn to the list of supplementary information which corrects a typing mistake, which is the application number for the existing monopole was 2019, not 2018. There is also a clearer site location plan. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sylvester, you have 5 minutes to address the committee.
Thank you, Chair and members of the Planning Committee. As a ward councillor for Horwich North East, I have objected to this planning application for the principal reason that the replacement monopole is to be sited directly in front of residential properties. I believe the proposals are contrary to policy CG3 parts 2 and 3 of Bolton's Core Strategy Development Plan 2011. I objected to this application on the 26th of April. And interestingly, on the 27th of May, a month after I raised my objection to the monopole in my ward, planning officers refused an application for another monopole in Great Lever Ward on Green Lane, application 08147/20, for a monopole with associated equipment cabinets by the same applicant for the following reason. The proposed 20-metre high monopole and wraparound cabinets at base would appear as a wholly incongruous and dominant feature that would be harmful to the residential setting and out of scale with its surroundings, contrary to policy CG3 of Bolton's core strategy. Officers came to this conclusion by saying in the report for that application, the surrounding area is characterised by low-rise development consisting mostly of 2-storey dwellings. The proposed mast would be 20 metres in height, which would be significantly taller than nearby streetlights that exist around the perimeter of the central grass verge and immediate area. The monopole would also be significantly wider than the streetlights and would have an unshrouded antennae, whilst the cabinets would add further to the volume of the structure. It is therefore considered that the proposal would appear as a much bulkier and visually intrusive structure that would have a stark utilitarian design compared to the surrounding street furniture. The above impact would also be worsened as it would have a prominent positioning on the perimeter of the grass verge. It will be also located away from nearby trees and other features that could serve to limit its impact. Furthermore, as it will be sited fronting Green Lane, it would have long-range views due to the 2 linear angles to the north east and west, further which would enhance its dominance within the street scene. All of the comments made by officers to refuse that Great Lever application are completely relevant for the application in my ward. Indeed, those comments could be completely replicated as reasons for refusal of the application in my ward. Note that officers refused the application in Great Lever because it was contrary to policy CG3 being directly in front of residential dwellings. I disagree with the comments made on page 92 of your planning report, which basically suggests that because residents face the Fowler industrial estate from their houses, somehow this makes it fine that a monopole is located right outside their properties. The Fowler industrial estate is at a lower level across Chorley Road, so is less visual to those residential properties and is screened by bushes and trees on the other side of Chorley Road, so not as visually intrusive as the planning report is trying to make out. The proposed monopole and associated cabinets will, however, be very visually intrusive. I'm also objecting to this application because technically the proposed monopole is 2 metres away from the existing monopole, which the applicant wants to replace. We have over the past few months heard a lot about 2 metres distancing. If this structure was built 2 metres away from a planning permission granted, then a planning enforcement case would arise. 2 metres difference in distance is therefore a relevant factor in this planning application. With the proposed location site being 2 metres away from the existing monopole, it is technically therefore a new location site, and the applicant has not supplied any alternative locations to site the proposed replacement monopole. I believe the applicant should have done this. There is another monopole to the rear of the Texaco garage in the vicinity. How about a site share? Has the applicant explored this? I have come up with an alternative location myself in the area away from residential dwellings, and residents have suggested generally somewhere on the local work sites, of which there are a number of different landowners who could be approached. I just don't think that these monopoles should be sited directly in front of residential properties, and this length of green space on Chorley Road is the only length of green space in that area, and it is completely spoiled by the present monopole, and it will be even more spoiled because this application proposes to increase the number of associated equipment cabinets alongside it. So if there is an opportunity of getting rid of the existing monopole and siting the replacement elsewhere so that it is not directly in front of residential properties, I will be grateful if you could vote for refusal so that an alternative site is found, which I believe is entirely possible. Finally, Chair, the report also states on page 94 that Horwich Town Council raised no comment at the meeting of 23rd of April 2020. In fact, Horwich Town Council had no meeting on the 23rd of April because all council meetings were suspended because lockdown guidance.
One sentence, please, to complete. One sentence to sum up.
Sure, Chair. I'm just saying that Horwich Town Council were not meeting on the 23rd of April because of lockdown guidance. So as a statutory consultancy, they have not made any comments on this planning application, contrary to what the report may say that they met. They didn't have a meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Brady, you have similarly 5 minutes to address the committee.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me? It's not gone red.
We can hear you. Yes,
you can. Fine. Okay, thank you. Horwich Town Council objected to the previous application for a 20-metre pole on grounds it was inappropriate in a residential area. No objections were made to this one, as Horwich Planning Committee didn't meet, as Councillor Sylvester said, due to COVID-19, and councillors had no information as the planning portal wasn't working for many people either. Going back to this report, paragraph 23, the officer's report notes the increase in number of ground cabinets to 8, which would have harm, they say would have harm in the form of clutter. It would have serious harm. Paragraph 24 states the mast is sited close to a busy classified carriageway and the entrance to Fowler Industrial Estate with its associated signage and industrial commercial paraphernalia. This pole would actually be on the opposite side of the road from Fowler Industrial Estate and situated right in front of houses, as you've seen on the photographs. Recently, officers recommended refusal of a 20-metre mast on grassy land in Green Lane, Bolton, as wholly incongruous and a dominant feature. Officers also recommended refusal of a 20-metre mast outside Kersler Precinct, saying it was utilitarian in appearance and would therefore present an incongruous new feature in the street scene and is considered it would have an undue impact on the outlook of residential units and therefore contrary to core strategy policy CG4. This application is no different to those refused, other than it was suggested it would replace a 20-metre mast, which should have been refused in 2019 for the same reasons the two applications on Green Lane and Kersley Precinct were reduced in 2020. So I would ask the Planning Committee to please look at refusing this one for the exact same reasons that were applied elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brady. The matter is now open for debate. No speakers? Councillor Peel.
Thanks, Chair. I don't think any of us are experts about the actual cell coverage that these masts require. I know they've got to be in specific locations to get the coverage that's needed. It's to do with the built-up environment and the contours of the land. Many years ago, when we're dealing with earlier generations of mobile phone masts, the council did use a company called Digital Solutions. I'm not sure if it may be in the report, I may have missed it, but we did use an outside consultancy that would actually look at and examine what the applicant was telling us in terms of their technical requirements. It's quite possible that was done in the first application. However, I think what Councillor Sylvester's asking for, if I hear him correctly, is consideration to be given to move the mast from where it is. It's not too far, actually. If it is moved away from the houses in front of the more commercial units, that would actually satisfy quite a lot of people. I also want to thank Councillor Sylvester, because I understand it was himself that alerted planning officers to the fact that the map that members were given, I think you had to need not a magnifying glass, but a microscope to actually find the exact location of where this was going. So I think we got on the late list an updated plan showing its exact location. So thank you for that. It certainly does worry me that it's outside these houses, and it isn't unproven health issues. It is to do with it being an obstructive and incongruous feature in what is a semi-residential area. So I'd be happy to. I'm not sure how we would go on in terms of refusal on the grounds that it's replacing an existing mast and no greater height. But I think we need to go back to the applicant. I think we need to examine their argument about the coverage that's needed, and see if they will move it to a less obvious position. I don't think it would cost any additional cost on them, other than perhaps just some minor ducting. But I'll move it on those grounds. I think the councillors there in Horwich deserve to have the committee giving them a chance to try and find a better location. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got a question from Councillor Dean to officers.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify something. I think I know the answer to this, but I'm not 100% sure. The local councillors, both of them, mentioned existing masts that were refused in Great Lever and I think in Kersley. Now, these were they replacement masts like this one, or were they new masts that were applied for? Thank you.
Ms. Turton.
Thank you, Chair. So the mast in Kersley that you referred to, that was a new mast. I'm not 100% sure about the Green Lane mast. I believe that was a new mast as well, rather than a replacement mast. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hayes.
Thank you.
Councillor Hayes.
I'm waiting for the light to go on.
Yep, indeed.
Councillor Hayes, I can't see your video at the moment, so you may be better just to speak.
Yes, okay. The video is on. I will second refusal if that's what Councillor Peel was doing. I'm told that
Councillor Peel, I thought, moved deferment.
Okay, I will move refusal then. I think we should take a lot of notice of the ward councillors who have very similar views. I'm told that the original approval of this particular mast included the statement that there were no schools nearby. And I believe that's not a correct statement. I believe there are schools nearby, both across the road and within about 200 metres. I'm not one of those who believes all these theories about 5G and rays and this, that and the other. But the main reason I think is it's intrusive for the householders living right next to it. So I will move refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Howard.
Thank you, Chair. The first thing I want to say is I think I won't be alone in saying that I'm very pro digital infrastructure, because so many people actually need it in their own homes, and obviously those that have businesses and so on, and public sector environments, as Councillor Hayes mentioned, schools. It's so important to our lives now. But actually, because it's so important to our lives, we have to get appropriate sightings for these masts, and I think that can be done for the infrastructure that's required for digital. And I think that the councillors, the ward councillors, make a persuasive case on this. The first thing that came to mind actually when I looked at this was what is the position of Horwich Town Council, because of course I did look at the previous case somewhat because it was mentioned in the information today. And I did regret, of course, that there was that got some permission, and that there was a sighting then 2018, 2019, that and so this is now, if you like, an increase, an upgrade for 5G, but will include more street furniture, if I can call it that. And the situation is, I'm familiar where in larger highway, there has, for example, where there's been a bit more of a green strip or a concrete strip or whatever in the middle of a highway, where, and then there's distance from property where some of this type of hard infrastructure has gone in, but that's more in the middle of a highway. Now, looking at this, there's no getting away from the fact that Councillor Sylvester did describe this as being, if you like, towards the end of the front of the housing, and then you get to that green spot. You do, absolutely. I think there's just a car route between a small one, of course, between the house, and this is at the side of the main road. So it is there in front of housing stock. I'm not persuaded actually by the case that's made about View and Fowler Industrial Estate and so on, as if it kind of, well, you've got that hard structure of industry and therefore this is a kind of add-in. I feel differently actually, and I might have to be guided that it's not the approach to take with planning, but I actually think if you've got property and part of its view is something that's somewhat industrial, why would we want to be adding to it? I take a different view on that. I would want to look for a space, if there's one at all possible. I want to respect the officers for the paperwork they've put together, though, because it is made clear that I think there was a look around Texaco garage frontage. There's something, isn't there, that describes where some look was made by this company, and that wasn't an amenable place. And yet, of course, there is a mast towards the back of Texaco garage, that if there's only going to be a need to move a small way, that will be all the better. But I would want a bit more exploration, please, of whether this could be resited. And again, as I say, surely that is a good thing for digital infrastructure. If a place can be found, and yes, that would be a change, it would still benefit the needs of digital infrastructure for Horwich and people wanting to support it, rather than having this you know, increase, if you like, in front of their houses on this stretch of Chorley New Road. I can second on this case. Then I can second deferment, with deferment still standing at the present time as a proposition. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sherrington.
Thank you, Chair. I will be supporting deferment on this because I do think that you've got an industrial estate right opposite. You've got a garage that isn't that far away either. And as Councillor Sylvester has said, it's not going exactly on this site either. It's going to be a couple of metres away anyway. So why not have it across the road, diagonally across the road on the industrial estate? And it could actually go on to the industrial estate. There's room on there that it could actually go on. And you know, these people, you know, who put these masts up, I'm surrounded by them, by the way. So I mean, I do actually have a little bit of knowledge about this. I have 3 all the way around me, and yeah, I get a poor service. So I thought I'd just say that. It just misses me completely. Anyway, but there is one of them that is here that was looked at. I got told by the mass people that they were looking at this particular place to put it, and then they come back and said, oh, but the people won't let us put it there on this industrial estate. The people at the industrial estate were never even contacted. They were never even asked. And we've probably got a situation like that here. I'd be very interested to see if they were ever contacted on the industrial estate straight across the road from it. I very much doubt they were. And I think
we're not here to speculate, Councillor Sherrington.
Sorry about that.
We're not here to speculate, Councillor Sherrington.
Sorry about that, John, but I can only take things from history. And so I'm just wondering whether we should have it deferred, and then these people can go along and start asking other people whether they're prepared to actually have these masts on their site, which would be a lot better because nobody lives there. I find it bizarre that the only place where there is houses, they want to go and stick it in front of them. So so I go for deferment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Allen.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'm happy to support deferment. There is a reason why telephone operators want to keep to the same site, of course. There's several reasons. First of all, they already have the electricity supply. Secondly, they have the expensive and multiple fibre optic cables in the ground that go into the cabinets. So moving a site is quite an expensive operation. They also like sites on pavements because, of course, they're owned by the council. And council, it seems, are a lot easier to persuade than perhaps private enterprise on an industrial estate. But all of that we shouldn't let them bully us into pushing these things forward. Just because it's difficult for them to move it, you know, that's no excuse. If we don't like it, we should say so. I am a bit intrigued by the fact that this is a replacement mast, when in my ward on Beaumont Road we have an upcoming application for a 5G mast, which is additional to the mast that's already there. So it does strike me as slightly strange, but there you go. So we shouldn't be put off by the fact that it might be difficult for them to move, and I think we should defer it until they come back to us with alternative locations considered, and if they're dismissed, then that's fine, but they need to tell us why before we get bulldozed into this. It isn't, by the way, for me, it isn't the mass that's the problem, obtrusive though it is. It's the cabinets that form the biggest problem. And it is around all of these sites. And I think I'm right in saying when this is finished, there'll be 6 cabinets. So another reason for deferral might be that the operator looks at whether this number of cabinets can be reduced. You know, I'd rather have 1 or 2 larger ones than a whole line of 6 smaller ones. So lots of reasons, and I'll be supporting deferral. Thank you, Chair.
Alan. Councillor Wright, and then Councillor Hayes come back on with a short comment, and then we'll take the vote. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I'm in support of a 5G network because I live in Horwich and I'm lucky I can just get this reception now, but it's not always this lucky. There are concerns about it being so close to primary school or Charlie New Road, and I agree with the need for deferment on this because I would like Horwich Town Council to be able to have the opportunity to comment on this. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Hayes.
Yes, thank you, Chair. As it doesn't appear I'm going to get a second refusal, I'll go along with deferment. Councillor Allen hit it on the head, really. A big problem is the number of cabinets, and that I think is very visually intrusive, not just the pole. So I'll go along with deferral.
Okay, thank you. It's therefore been proposed and seconded that this matter be deferred, and you're voting for or against deferment. Mrs. Ridge.
Thank you, Chair. So, Councillor Allen.
For.
Councillor Ayoub. For. Councillor Connor.
For.
Councillor Darvish.
For.
Councillor Dean.
For.
Councillor Howarth.
For.
Councillor Hayes.
For.
Councillor Hornby.
For.
Councillor Mistra.
For.
Councillor Peel.
For.
Councillor Radcliffe.
For.
Councillor Sanders.
For.
Councillor Sharrington.
For.
Councillor Walsh.
For.
Councillor Waters.
For.
Councillor Newall.
For.
Councillor Wright.
For.
That matter stands deferred. That's the whole of the agenda. Safe to report that on the back pages of the bundle we have the decisions of planning inspectors, and one that's 9-1 notification. That's there for noting. Could I thank you for your attendance? I thank officers for their support and declare the meeting closed.
Thank you.
Vicky.